Ask Dan Schneider. Ann Halopa writes to me, Dan, do you think that Philip Roth is the greatest living American writer? That's a fairly odd kind of question and quite specific. Regarding Roth, no. Greatest living American writer, other than saying myself, my wife, probably be the top two. If you're saying even the greatest published American writer that's still living, I wouldn't put him up there. If you're talking fiction, I would go with William Kennedy. He's probably the best novelist in America. As for Roth, the only book of his I've ever read fully through was Portnoy's Complaint, and that was probably my early 20s, probably mid 80s, late 80s. I read a couple of other of his books, or some major portions of them. I read the one, The Human Stain, which was okay. Roth is someone who is one of those what I call dead white male writers, and that he's a solid writer. He's an old-time writer. He's someone like a John Updike, who I've read two of the Rabbit books and a few of his short stories. I may have read, I don't know if Roth's ever done short stories. I think I may have read his short story. But it's okay, good, solid. He reminds me a lot of the South African Ian McEwan, who writes okay stories, but there's no spark, there's no life to those stories. There's nothing that you could identify as great. There's no passages that grab out at you. You know, he's someone who's, I think, very much in the New Yorker vein, if not the magazine New Yorker, the New York intellectual, especially the New York Jewish Eastern establishment kind of writer. A lot of his work has no resonance beyond the upper crust and the East Coast, MFA type class. The major problem is that, and because he doesn't write about the lower classes, there isn't a lot within him to hang on to. He's certainly better than the postmodernists like Thomas Pynchon or David Foster Wallace, who is a postmodernist despite what people say, or the Dave Eggers, or the guys who come of age in the last 25, 30 years who are just utter garbage, who don't know how to write at all. I mean, Roth can write competent sentences, he can write competent paragraphs, but nothing great, nothing deep. No one holds Roth to their bosom and says, Roth. Oh, I did read his 5 short stories. I'm just looking online as I'm doing this. And that, I think I did read the 5 short stories. So Portnoy's 5 short stories and a few, 2 or 3 other books that I read major portions of. The Human Stain, the one that comes to my mind the most. So anyway, is he the greatest living American writer? No. Is he the greatest living American writer who's published by a major house? No. Is he a terrible writer? No. He's someone that, though, in 50 or 100 years won't be remembered. To use a literary antecedent, he's one of those American writers that, if you look back at the 19th century, was a big name, but who have been since superseded by the Mark Twains and the Melvilles, who were at some point ridiculed to a certain degree. So middle of the road, that's probably the best way to describe Philip Roth. Thanks for the question.